Near my house, there's a shared space where I like to go work. And this space also includes a cafe. And some people are there to work, while others are there to socialize and catch up with friends over coffee. The daytime crowd is much more serious and work-focused than the evening crowd, although you'll occasionally see high school or college students doing some after-school studying. Well, there are a few of us who are regulars, and then everyone else shows up either randomly or periodically. Not long ago, I ran into a guy who used to show up every now and then, and he told me that he recently saw a lady who would eat and have coffee at the cafe, and she told him that she doesn't go anymore because she got into a political argument with another lady there. And because of that, she decided she's never going back. Politics ruining coffee is a sad thing. We all know how heated politics can be. I didn't realize that it had made its way into work share spaces. But I'm not surprised. In the United States, we're more divided than we've been in a long time, and the tension is high. Within a 3-month period of running into this guy from the cafe, I also ran into a mom who moved her family out of her neighborhood because she said that the other moms were toxic. A dad who moved his son to a different baseball team because he couldn't stand the coach. An older man who left his church because he thought the leadership was too scared to stand up for anything. A woman who celebrated that her boss was fired because he was such an awful person. These are just small examples, but the point is that in a world that's supposedly becoming more accepting, tolerant, and inclusive, it seems like people can make enemies faster than ever. Here's the thing. Most people don't refer to other people as their enemies, but just because we don't say it, it doesn't mean that other people don't fit in that category. Think about it. Have you ever said or secretly thought, I can't stand blank? Now fill in the blank with people who believe or vote differently than you, certain people in the government, certain people in your neighborhood, certain people in social media, certain coworkers, the parents of players on the other team, people who have more money than you, people who have less money than you, people you're jealous of, people who are jealous of you, people who are overly opinionated, people who are overly nice. I mean, the list could go on and on. The truth is, there are days when you could fill in the blank with your kids or your mom. You'd never call your mom your enemy, but without realizing it, there are days when she fits into that category. Same with your spouse, sister-in-law, mother-in-law, and even best friend. Maybe that feels like a stretch, but consider this. Do you ever have fake arguments in your head with someone? Or real arguments out loud? If someone offends you, they can become a temporary enemy. For example, a contractor who doesn't show up or get his or her work done, a person who cuts you off in traffic, a child who doesn't do his or her homework, a boss or client who demands too much out of you, a friend who doesn't text you back, or a teacher who doesn't email you back, a customer service worker you don't agree with, a rule your child's school enforces or doesn't enforce. There are all kinds of things that can make you mad at someone. And even if it's for a short period of time, those things can put that person in the enemy category. Or let's be very real here. Is there someone whose failure you would secretly or openly celebrate? Is there someone you would like to see struggle or lose? Maybe it's someone you know, or maybe it's someone who's known in the public eye. Whether it's because of jealousy, aggravation, varying opinions, or a previous disagreement, seeing them flop would bring you pleasure. Even if you wouldn't call them your enemy out loud, this attitude qualifies them for that category. The truth is, whether it's a fleeting moment of anger or years of seething, when our feelings towards someone aren't exactly positive, we can classify that person as an enemy. Fortunately for us, Jesus addressed this very issue. In this series, we've been talking about how when Jesus walked the earth, he revealed the heart of God because he is God. And since Jesus is God, we learn more about God's character from reading about Jesus' interactions with people in the Gospels. One way Jesus communicated with people was by using thoughtful questions. Through those questions, we learn more about the heart of God. Let me give you a warning first. The question we're going to look at today isn't an easy one, but if we can apply it to our lives, it can change our hearts and set us free in a totally new way. During Jesus' time on earth, having enemies was an obvious thing. The Jewish people were treated poorly by the Romans who ruled over them. In turn, the Jews considered themselves set apart by God, meaning they viewed all non-Jews as unqualified outsiders. And across the board, people didn't associate with people from other races or cultures. Everyone simply looked out for themselves. In the Gospel of Matthew, the first book of the New Testament, Matthew records a sermon that Jesus preached. It's famously called the Sermon on the Mount, which refers to the mountainside where Jesus delivered this message. In it, Jesus talked a lot about what your life would look like if you had a big, vibrant faith. In one part of the sermon, Jesus addressed the topic of enemies. He started by saying this: "You have heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.'" We're all familiar with this concept. It's unlikely that we were actually taught this, but let's face it, this feeling comes pretty naturally, right? And like I already said, your neighbor can become your enemy pretty quickly. Jesus continued, "But I say, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. In that way, you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. For he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust alike." Our treatment of other people shouldn't be based on what they do, what they believe, or what they say. Instead, our behavior should be based on the goodness of God. When I drop my kids off at school, I ask them this question: why do people matter? They say, because they're people. I then ask, what's the best way to show people that they matter? They reply, by being kind and loving. That's my version of the story of the Good Samaritan, one of Jesus' most famous parables. A guy is beat up, robbed, and left for dead on the side of the road, and a total stranger from a different race picks him up, nurses his wounds, takes him to shelter. The message in this story is clear. People matter simply because they do. Then Jesus delivered this two-part question. If you love only those who love you, what reward is there for that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you are kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even pagans do that. Here's what's ironic. Matthew, one of Jesus' closest followers, was a tax collector when Jesus invited him to be a disciple. During that time, tax collectors were considered corrupt, traitorous, and unclean because they took money from fellow Jews and gave it to the Roman government. They were despised. So using this example, Jesus pointed out that it's easy to love those who love us in return. Even the so-called bad people of society do this. If you and I only respond to people in the way that we feel like responding, and we only love people who are nice, kind, and loving toward us in return, we're just like everyone else. Anybody can do that. But as followers of Jesus, we're called to follow his example. We're called to love those we deem unlovable, to love those who haven't treated us well, to love those we consider undeserving of love. Think about what Jesus did at the crucifixion. He was beaten, tortured, and mocked. Yet after all of this unjust, unmerited treatment, he said this, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Jesus prayed for and asked for forgiveness for the very people who were taking his life. His friends abandoned him. The crowds turned against him. People were unfair to him, and he deserved none of it. He loved and he healed people, and they killed him. He cared for children and women who were ignored in that culture, and he was tortured in return. And yet, he continued to love, forgive, and pray for people, all of which conveys a powerful truth. The heart of God extends love to enemies. God loves everyone, period. When Jesus was on earth, he loved his friends, his enemies, and his friends who became his enemies. His love was and is completely unfailing. Now, it's easy to hear that God loves everyone. We love that, right? It sounds amazing. But what does that mean for us? Well, when we're on the other side of the fence of a friend, a foe, or a family member, what are some things we can do to reflect the heart of God? We can pray for them. It sounds cliche. It sounds easy. It's not. But it's exactly what Jesus did on the cross. It's a powerful way of diffusing bitterness. You may still have conflict. You may still disagree. You may still need to hold your ground or your stance, but that doesn't mean you can't genuinely pray for them. We can forgive them. Let me say this again. You can forgive your enemy and pray for him or her, and that doesn't mean you have to agree with them. And it doesn't mean it's easy, but I don't want my temporary enemies to have power over my mind. I don't want them to dominate my thinking. I say, I forgive them out loud or in my head over and over every time I think of them. And depending on how offended I am, I may need to do this 50 times a day. We can do something good for someone we don't like. This one is tough, but it can be a game changer for how we view that person. So maybe this week, try to pass on some encouragement to someone who's not your favorite. Check in with that family member who drives you crazy. Don't make it awkward and don't let them know that you're doing it because you don't like them, but it'll be good for you. There's going to be a constant stream of people who fall in and out of your enemy category. Having people on the other side of an argument or disagreement isn't really something that goes away. It stays constant. But the other thing that can stay constant is your commitment to following Jesus' lead when it comes to how you respond to them, with prayer, forgiveness, and goodness. The heart of God extends love to enemies, so let's go against the grain of culture and do the same.